molto un grande speaker internazionale che è venuto a raccontarci una delle cose più interessanti e meno raccontate forse della favolosa storia di 50 anni fa, di quando abbiamo messo piede per la prima volta sulla Luna. L'uomo che ha scritto il codice di Apollo, quello che è servito poi a fare gli allunaggi, quello che regolava le macchine, che ha aiutato Neil Armstrong e Buzz Aldrin nella loro impresa, Don Eyles, sul palco. Welcome.
Buongiorno amici. I'm here in my time machine from a time in the 60s and 70s when, after many centuries, many thousands of years of yearning, men first touched the moon. My job then was to write the flight software for the lunar module for the phase of the mission where the spacecraft descends from lunar orbit and touches down on the moon. I'm going to show you a series of slides. I'm going to go very fast to attempt to stay in my time limit. On the left, you see our president, John Kennedy, whose innovation was to have the vision to see that a civilian program done in the name of all mankind not only served human goals, but also served national goals. And he was willing to, he and his successor were willing to support it to the point where it was actually a success. And on the other side is Doc Draper, who founded the organization that I was proud to be part of within the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a university whose motto is Mens et Manus, mind and hand, which is MIT's motto, but also a pretty good motto for the Makers Faire movement. This innovation is the plan for going to the moon with a rendezvous in lunar orbit, although at the time that seemed like a very radical plan. And I wanted to have a call out to the engines that powered the booster, the giant F1 engine for the first stage of the Saturn booster on the left, and the hydrogen-oxygen, very efficient J2 engine that was used in the second and third stages. Another thing that had to be figured out was the role of the man versus the computer. And that drawing is from about 1963 that shows the two extremes. And that represents the final conclusion of what that relationship would be. That is the general purpose keyboard and display unit for the Apollo computer. You see keys labeled noun and verb. That was invented by Ramon Alonso as a good way of conceptualizing the communication in both directions between the computer and the human. And the LIM itself, a very innovative spacecraft. You could call it the first pure spacecraft in the sense that it was able to totally disregard any requirements of atmospheric flight. And obviously, I'm not going to spend time explaining that, but that represents the descent propulsion system, which caused us some trouble at a couple of different stages. And occasionally, I'm guilty of including a picture simply because I like the picture. But that's the lunar module in Earth orbit, as only occurred on a single mission. Another big innovation that made Apollo possible was inertial guidance, and the key instrument for that is pictured here. The picture on the left is the 1953 version being installed in MIT's B-29 bomber. That installation was followed by a cross-country flight, which, to everyone's surprise, did prove that the system could navigate from Boston to LA with an error of only 10 miles. Automatically. The human beings on the airplane control the altitude, but the course was steered by the computer based on the data from the inertial measurement unit. I should have pointed out that the purpose of that is, referring to the picture on the right, there's a gimbal structure there that allows the central components, which is an assembly of accelerometers and gyroscopes, allow the central component to keep an inertial orientation no matter how the spacecraft maneuvered around it. And the computer itself and the keyboard, which I've already referred to, 1 cubic foot, which was an early guess that held up, 70 pounds, 55 watts. It included 5,600 triple input NOR gates. The entire computer was built up of the same gate type because this was an early use of integrated circuits, and because there wasn't a great deal of confidence at that time that integrated circuits would catch on, there was a desire to allow the manufacturers to concentrate on a single type. You can see on the right the modules that plug into the back of the computer. This is one of them. This is 12 kilobytes of extremely reliable read-only memory. Probably weighs a kilogram, I would say. If I can find my device. And I did want to shout out to some of the individuals involved. The man on the left, who was Dick Batten, who was the overall person in charge of the on the coding, the programming, and the analysis and programming that went into the Apollo computer. He's also famous for having in 1961 developed the first trajectory to go to Mars by way of Venus, thus saving propellant, a maneuver that's symmetrical with respect to Venus, but with respect to the whole solar system, allows a downhill course, so to speak, from Earth to Venus to be turned into an outward uphill course in the direction of Mars, which is in a wider orbit, of course, than Earth. On the right is Hal Lanning, who in 1952 on MIT's Whirlwind computer originated the first compiler. And he also developed the what we could call the operating system for the Apollo computer. That's 3 other influences, 2 other influences, and me at the time I was hired. George Cherry on the left, who was the project manager for the LIM software, and Alan Klump, who did a lot of the engineering and who was my mentor, the person I worked with very closely for 7 years. And between Cherry and Klump, the landing was structured as illustrated here, essentially in 3 phases. The first phase was about shedding velocity. That having been done, the second phase allowed the spacecraft to assume an attitude that allowed the astronauts to have a clear view of the lunar surface ahead of them and to choose their landing spot. And then there was the third phase of the mission, which, when, as intended, the astronauts took over semi-manual control, still under the mediation of the computer, in order to fly like a helicopter and finally make a touchdown. My own end of the business was writing the flight software, and you may be picturing a monitor on my desk or a PC. None of that. What we stared at when we wanted to think about the onboard code was paper. And you see in that picture one of the books that contains a complete lunar module guidance computer program. It might be hard to figure out, but you knew the answer was in that one book, something that would certainly be impossible for any spacecraft in this era with its many hundreds of thousands of lines of code, if not millions. And we programmed it by means of punch cards using this machine, an IBM Model 26 key punch machine. And again, I won't explain in detail, but that's a page of code which contains examples of the 2 languages that we used in programming the Apollo guidance computer. The machine language or assembly language that we called BASIC, and an interpretive language that made it much more compact to do vector matrix arithmetic, which is the essence of navigating in 3 space. That in Cambridge is a simulator that we use that combined digital and analog computers. Here's NASA's version. The astronaut John Young called that the Great Train Wreck. That heap of boxes in the foreground has inside of it, deep inside of it, a perfect LIM cockpit. And the purpose of those boxes is to deliver displays for the windows, which were so good. I flew that simulator many times. Were so good that it really was possible to practice for landing at an exact predetermined spot on the moon, as every mission after Apollo 11 succeeded in doing. And I thought I should really mention Apollo 14, which is where my 15 minutes of fame came from, because I was able to deal with a short circuit in the abort button on the LIM control panel. That's the group of people who assisted that effort, because it was a team effort in Cambridge. And I wanted to come back to Doc Draper at the end, but there's another innovation in this picture. You see the patch for the Apollo 15 mission. The man that Doc Draper is talking to is a reporter, the woman, is a reporter named Mary Budd, who for every mission constructed a hat that was based upon the mission patch for the mission. And that's the Apollo 15 liftoff. Now, if the stories from the Apollo era have stirred you, you may be feeling that something is missing these days. People today are just as creative as they always were. The education these days in the STEM areas is way better than it was in my day. And the tools that are available are awesome. Anybody who can afford one of Mr. Banzi's Arduinos essentially has their own Apollo guidance computer to play with. All that is a great thing. It's contributed to the creativity that we see all around us at the Makers Fairs. As a keynoter, I don't think my only role, however, is to engage in mutual admiration, although I certainly feel that admiration. I want to talk briefly about the different purposes to which innovation is being put in today's world. There's war making, of course. The technical problems are interesting, considered in the abstract. But the damage, the way I think of it, is not so much that the weapons are dangerous in themselves, although they are, but because of that creativity, that innovation that goes into designing them is innovation that is lost to the realm of peaceful existence. And that, to me, is a great shame. Another primary motivation for innovation these days, of course, is money. You can be a billionaire in a few years if you design a successful app or a successful social medium. I was on the metro just yesterday and looking around me, and so many people in the car were deeply absorbed in their devices. And it did make me wonder whether or not what they were doing was really a good thing for human beings, or is it escapism that frees people perhaps from the fact that their labors to some extent are being exploited by the system. And so I come to exploration. I would like to propose exploration as the organizing principle for creativity. It's not a coincidence that in the Apollo era, there was also in the culture an explosion of exploration, both inner and outer. I think those things went together. And I would like to see spaceflight now again join in a whole cultural phenomenon of exploration, and I mean exploration in a broad sense. I certainly include art and science and the gathering of new experiences. So that's where I'll end, is to say that it's my hope that exploration, however it is in each individual case defined, will become the principal organizing principle for innovation. And I think if that happens, then this community will lead the world in a positive direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please.
My pleasure.
So, exploration, che bel messaggio. How many paid off? Please don't, sir, don't go away. I have a question for you. I have a question. Please, stay 1 more minute. So you were in the metro yesterday in Rome?
Yes.
In Rome?
In Rome.
The mayor is just leaving. How was the metro in Rome?
The metro in Rome was lovely.
It was lovely. That's good.
It was.
Wow. Just in time.
It was, however, very crowded.
You are such a kind person. It was good. Ok, devo sapere che linea ha preso perché non mi tornano i conti, ma adesso lo scopriamo. Which was the A o the B?
It was the blue line.
The blue line, okay, so, okay.
And then a little bit of the red.
You've been very lucky, probably. That's fine. Gli sto per leggere una notizia che ho trovato su internet. Adesso, so I'm going to read the news I read on the web about you yesterday.
Oh, sure.
Yesterday, quando ho fatto le ricerche su questo grande personaggio che è venuto, ho trovato su internet questa storia che dice che in sostanza sì, il codice è importante, tutto conta, ma quando stava arrivando Neil Armstrong è arrivato un allarme sbagliato dall'Apollo e per questo allarme sbagliato del software Apollo ha detto no, prendo io il controllo, Armstrong ha detto prendo io il controllo della macchina, ha tolto il computer e è atterrato da solo. E allora oggi avendolo qui ho detto dimmi la storia, cioè allora il software era sbagliato. So it's a true story?
Not exactly.
Okay.
The alarms that occurred 5 times during the descent were a symptom of a overload because of a sneak circuit, you could call it, that was subtracting 13% from the amount of computation time available to the computer. As a result of that, the computer restarted on the fly 5 times, but it continued to fly automatically until the point which was planned at 400 or 500 feet, where the astronauts always took over to fly in a semi-manual mode, where the computer is helping control altitude, but the astronaut, flying very much like a helicopter, can maneuver across the surface to choose the precise point of touchdown. So that was not a true statement.
Okay, so if you were President Trump, you would say just fake news. Can we say fake news? It's a fake news.
These things are hard to understand.
Okay.
I can't.
You can understand. Okay.
I can't blame
You're
the person.
A very kind person. I
I
appreciate
can't blame
yourself.
the person who wrote that
Okay,
with the same enthusiasm that I blame certain other Americans who tell lies habitually.
Okay, that's very good.